is looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane! Hey, Stella!
Suck on this.
What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Today, it is my divine pleasure to welcome David Lambert back to the channel to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Sam Peckinpah's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, a movie that was tailor-made for fans of Peckinpah's unique style of savage poetry. And the anniversary is not technically until Wednesday, but I don't care. I'm posting this fucker today. And for all you Peckinpah fans out there, a few weeks ago, Lambert and I tackled the Blu-ray release of Pat Garrett and Bill the Kid, and I'll leave a link to that conversation down in the description below. But I have to say up front that with all the terrible movies that I've been reviewing as of late, movies like Rebel Moon and Borderlands, it is a genuine relief to step back into the world of one of my favorite filmmakers discussing his work with a fellow fanatic. And with all that out of the way, Mr. Lambert, how the hell are you? And what have you been doing with yourself these last few weeks apart from crying day and night about the delayed release of Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 2?
Nothing of interest. I don't know. Nothing at all.
Been, making any podcast appearances, creating any art? What have you been occupying your time with?
I did an audio commentary for Shane with
cool.
John Arminio. I don't know if it's gonna be released. I don't know how good it was. But
for which channel?
I believe it's for the Pink Smoke. So I don't even know if I'm supposed to mention this. I don't know. And
I'm not. I don't think the spoiler is out there. All right. Well, breaking news. You heard it here first. So that's cool. Yeah. I mean, Shane, as you mentioned before in some of our recordings about other westerns, that is one of your all-time favorite westerns. I imagine you hurled yourself into it with your usual vigor and unique perspective.
Yeah, well, I talked a lot, and then the movie was over, and I was like, "Oh shit, I barely started." So I honestly don't know how good I did on that one. So,
well, I look forward to checking it out. But as I was getting prepared for this video, and I was thinking, like, all right, what are some other cool 50th anniversary topics that you and I could tackle down the road? But I realized right now, if you look at the 75th anniversary for movies, we're talking movies that were released like late 1949. I was like, wait a second, we're about to enter into like a 20-year streak of some of the best westerns ever made. So I feel like we've got all kinds of 75th anniversaries coming up for all kinds of great westerns throughout the 50s and 60s. So if you're game, I'm game to keep doing these kinds of videos in the future.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hey, just let me know.
Very cool. Well, I should also give a shout out to Bob Friedlander, aka Rupert Pupkin, aka Brian Saar, who sold me this Directed by Sam Peckinpah t-shirt, which I'll also leave a link to down in the description below. But he's selling, like, I think they got over 100 different t-shirts for different directors. But if you're a Peckinpah buff, hunt down your t-shirt there. But while we're plugging stuff, I do want to start and end with plugging some art you created related to this film. And maybe I'll turn the conversation over to you. When did you get to the idea to create this print of War Notes? How long did it take you? And how can people find it if they want to get their hands on it? And I've actually prepared a clip from your art, which I hope you'll appreciate.
You got jewels in your ears, diamonds up your nose. You son of a bitch. It wasn't worth it, baby. It wasn't worth her. I'll be damned if she's not keeping the best part of you company. You low-life bastard.
So there it is. I think it's one of the best pieces of art that I've ever seen by you. And I've seen a lot of really hot neck ladies that you've drawn, but War Notes does something special to me. So lay it on me. When did you get the idea to create that?
You know, actually, what was it? Probably about 2.5 years ago, I think. Maybe it's more like 3 years, whatever. I started working digitally. I had never done that before. And so the first thing I drew was War Notes, just because, I don't know, it's fun to draw. So then after I got a little bit better at it, I revisited that initial drawing, and yeah, I don't know. I just went from there. I mean,
And is the pose a production still, or is it a freeze frame from the film? Because it seems like something that was taken like as a publicity still on the set, but I can't remember like an actual shot from the movie in that exact pose.
Yeah, I believe it's a production still. I think it's kind of a somewhat famous photo of him from the film. But yeah, it's not actually like directly in the movie itself. But yeah, I don't know. Warren Oates is just, I mean, he's one of my very favorite actors, obviously. And I don't know. He's a lot like Harry Dean Stanton. He's just really fun to draw. So that's really kind of the genesis behind it. Obviously, I love this film, and I love Peckinpah. I love Warren Oates. So it just was somewhat natural. So I don't know, not a whole lot more insight from there.
I think this is a line from a movie, and I can't remember which line it's from, but you know what? It's from The Third Man, which actually that 75th anniversary is coming up. But there's a great scene where Trevor Howard is talking about how generals will put the picture of their rival general on the wall, and they'll study them, and over time they feel like they come to know them, and he feels the same way about the character of Harry Lime, that he's come to know him over time. But when you're staring deep into the eyes of Warren Oates for a long period of time, drawing him, did you uncover any hidden revelations about the, whatever rot is in his soul that allowed him to bring this character to life in such great, loving, vivid detail?
Yeah, so many hidden revelations, but I don't feel I should really share those kind of things here.
That'd be boring.
Those are for me alone.
Fair enough. Well, where can people find this if they want to buy it from you? Because I've seen you putting it for sale. And I saw also you posted on Twitter at one point, there's some like collectible shop, like a half hour from where you live, that had it prominently displayed in the window, and you didn't even know.
Yeah, there's actually in San Diego, like an antique store called Oates General. So it's actually named after Warren Oates. And I guess someone purchased it from me and gifted it to the owner, so they have it prominently displayed there. So not only is it displayed there, but the actual antique store itself is named after Warren Oates. So that was I've yet to visit them. I need to go check them out.
Speaking of physical copies, I own a physical copy. Hang on, give me 5 seconds. I'll be right back. Bada beep, bada bing, bada bap. You were kind enough to send this bad boy to me, and I've got it preserved alongside all my comics on my comic book shelf, so that it'll, I can show it off anytime a fellow Peckinpah or Warren Oates enthusiast comes by to visit.
Yeah. So anyone that is interested in purchasing a copy, a poster, or a print or whatever, they could DM me on Twitter. I'm under David Lambert Art. I'm on Patreon, David Lambert Art, Facebook, David Lambert Art, and Instagram, David Lambert Art. So any of those places, if you DM me. My print guy is relocating, so he's kind of out of commission. So I need to find another print person. So it might take a little while, but yeah, send me a DM and I'll give you the pricing and everything, and send you a copy if you're so interested.
Fantastic. Well, let's just go ahead and dive right into things. So my first encounter with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia was under unusual circumstances, but I imagine if you were a kid going to the movies with your dad in the 80s, because it might be the ultimate kind of dad comedy, but this was my first encounter with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Where am I?
You're in the records room.
The records room? Oh, I'm fine.
Can I get you something?
Yeah, do you have the Beatles' White Album? Never mind, just get me a glass of hot fat. And bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia while you're out there.
So had you seen Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia before you saw Fletch, or like me, did you discover it through Fletch?
No, I don't think I've ever actually seen Fletch.
Oh, you love Fletch. Fletch, everybody thinks it's just going to be some kind of dumb 80s comedy. It's actually a really well-made, like loving homage to kind of that Philip Marlowe, private eye kind of archetype and that sort of thing. So if you want basically like a great Raymond Chandler story, but with Chevy Chase, Fletch totally delivers. And anyway, needless to say, that reference went miles over my head at age 9 when I saw it in the theater.
Oh, yeah. There was also that guy from The Simpsons, Jim Reardon, one of the directors of like many famous episodes of The Simpsons. I know one of his early animated shorts in the 80s, before like working with like Ralph Bakshi and other people, was Bring Me the Head of Charlie Brown.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so it's a short film.
And step on it.
Where a bunch of mercenaries go to kill Charlie Brown or something to that effect. It ends with a huge massacre at the end, and it has a whole it has audio from the Wild Bunch, the whole bitch part, when Pike Bishop gets shot by the woman and he turns around and shoots her and says bitch. That's in there and stuff. So I believe it's on YouTube. Bring Me the Head of Charlie Brown by Jim Reardon, one of the guys behind the golden era of The Simpsons. So
yeah, those first 7 or 8 seasons are basically untouchable. Well, my real first encounter with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia was in college on Laserdisc, and I was right in the throes of my initial obsession with old movies. And when any cinephile or film enthusiast gets obsessed with movies, there's a year or two where you're just lost to all humanity because you're not coming up for air unless people are willing to join you as you watch all these movies one after another. But I went to the library, checked out a Clemens Library at UVA, brought the Laserdisc back to my frat house as a third year at UVA, and I showed the trailer to my friends, and they were like, "Oh, we're watching this right now." And so we popped a few beers, and this is a little taste of the trailer that we saw that got us really fired up for the flick.
This is Alfredo Garcia. He's about to become a very important man.
We are looking for an old buddy of ours, a compadre named Alfredo Garcia.
A private army is scouring 3 countries to find Alfredo Garcia.
Well, don't worry, if he's alive, I'll find him. Alive isn't our problem.
Someone has offered $1 million for his head.
If I ever get my hands on him, I'm gonna kill him. All we require from you is physical proof that Garcia is dead.
And we're prepared to settle for his head.
Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia.
So yeah, we were sold. We sat down and watched it, and we had no idea what to expect. We hadn't read any reviews ahead of time. It was, it was kind of like the early days of the internet. So basically, you still would just either check things out of a video store or a library, and you just throw them in and see what they had to say. And very early on, it got its hooks into us, and we were just totally enthralled. But it's one of those movies where it's so different from a lot of other Peckinpah's movies, and at times it's such a quiet, personal movie in so many ways. If you're expecting nothing but machine gun fire and guns blazing, it will be a disappointment. But what was surprising to us is that it's just this fascinating character study. So I don't have that Laserdisc from the library, but I did pick it up on DVD. And then I also picked up recently on Blu-ray, because this is one of those movies where you can't just have one copy. You got to have 2 copies. So I'm a proud owner of 2 copies of it, and yeah, uncensored in all of its glory. But in your own words, how would you make the pitch to people who maybe they've seen The Wild Bunch, maybe they've seen Straw Dogs, maybe they've seen some of Peckinpah's more famous movies, but they have yet to experience this movie? How do you make the pitch? Because I would never recommend this be somebody's first Peckinpah movie, but I feel like if you're a Peckinpah fanatic, it'll rapidly become one of your favorite Peckinpah movies.
Ooh, how do I make the pitch? I don't know. I'm a terrible pitch man.
Then how would you describe it in your own words? What is the gist? What is it about this story that grabs you and maintains your interest?
Ooh, shit. What is it about this that grabs my interest? I mean, like you said, I wouldn't make this your first Peckinpah movie if you've never seen a Peckinpah film. But I believe just the fact that it's the only film that Peckinpah ever made that he claimed that this is his pure vision. You know what I mean? This is the only movie that he basically said wasn't fucked with by the studio or anything like that. It was shot very low budget, like $1.3 million or something, in Mexico with an almost entirely Mexican crew. And he got kind of in trouble, Peckinpah, by talking about how much freedom he had shooting in Mexico, how the American.
How dare you enjoy making a movie? That's not allowed.
Yeah, and there was some kind of, I can't remember, the association was very upset by it. I mean, Peckinpah was trying to get dual citizenship in Mexico at this time. So it is just that, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is just, it's really just a very, I mean, all of his films are very autobiographical, but this one there's been a lot of, a lot of people have talked about how this one feels maybe the most autobiographical It's, you know, famously, people always talk about how Warren Oates was essentially doing an impression of Peckinpah.
Even borrowed his shades.
Yes, exactly. So much so that he borrowed his sunglasses that Peckinpah would always wear. And you know, and Peckinpah would, when he would act, he'd be like, "This isn't John Dillinger. We're not, you know, like, take it down." Like,
which he had done with did he do that with Walter Hill? Or who did he do that with? Who directed? Oh, no, it was John Milius. He'd done Dillinger with John Milius only like 1 or 2 years prior.
Yeah, exactly. And that but just that, and it's always been made kind of a point by people who work in the film, like, that was the performance that Peckinpah wanted from Warren Oates, but they all kind of talk about how Peckinpah wasn't aware that he was doing a Peckinpah impression. I don't know if that's true. I feel that, I mean, there was obviously a lot of a haze of drugs and booze that could have.
Is it true that it was Warren Oates who introduced Peckinpah to the lovely temptation of booger sugar? Because I heard that this was the movie where, let's just say, Peckinpah's mercurial nature and violent mood swings started to get a little more exacerbated, where he could swing from, you know, your greatest buddy to your worst enemy very quickly. But I read somewhere that it was on this movie where Warren Oates was like, well, if you're feeling a little tired, have a little of this and you'll feel right as rain again. And, you know, Peckinpah's life and career started to fly off the rails shortly thereafter.
I'm not sure. I might have to look into that, but I don't know if I believe that Peckinpah was not aware that Warren Oates was basically doing something of an impression of him in the role. I feel if Peckinpah was aware, he would never tell anyone. You know what I mean? I feel that Peckinpah would not want people to know that he was so obviously, so nakedly putting himself on screen. Whether or not he was aware, I'm not sure. But I honestly, I feel that he would have known. He was not the type of person who would be so oblivious to that.
Well, it seems like if there is a happiness anywhere to be found in the work of Peckinpah, or like an ideal of what he would like life to be, when I think of Benny sitting under a tree with a beautiful woman, slurping on vodka, and they're just talking, and like maybe she'll play the guitar a bit and that sort of thing. But like, if there's a moment of peace in his life, like there's actually even a picture from, I think, 67 or 68 with one of his former flings with whom he had a child in almost that exact same pose, hanging out under a tree. Like, so this is really just like you, like, and a life that was filled with confrontation and a lot of, like, you know, troubling experiences in the movie industry and that sort of thing. It seems like at least he managed to slip into this movie, as dark as it might be, that one little moment where you feel like this is what like Sam Peckinpah's idea of heaven is. But yeah, it definitely feels like one of his most personal movies. And I feel like just this whole notion of the head, like bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia, like traveling with his head, it can represent so many things. And I feel like you can interpret it so many different ways, but it's like, does the head represent success in the movie industry and how it's going to ultimately like force Peckinpah to like destroy his own soul in order to achieve success? Or once he's achieved success, will he just throw it all away and go out in a hail of bullets? Like, there's so many different ways to wrestle with what does the head signify, if it does signify anything at all. And I think that's what keeps people coming back to it. Just like, what does the head represent to all of us and to Peckinpah, and why is it, you know, like such a key to help, like, you know, like, this is our ticket out of here, baby. He keeps saying like, this is our ticket out. This is our one-way ticket out. It's like, we're talking about $10,000. Like, even in 1974, $10,000 wasn't that much money, but he's acting like it's like the gold they're going to be rewarded with the train heist at the end of the Wild Bunch or something to that effect. But am I just being a blithering idiot, or am I onto something here?
Oh no, you're on to something for sure. Your idiocy is completely unrelated to what you just said.
Fantastic.
No, that's absolutely true. You know, like same thing with Deke Thornton in The Wild Bunch. Same thing with Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Same thing with a lot of his protagonists. It's these guys who are selling out to do these shitty jobs for something, and Peckinpah has to relate to that. And it's like, and his protagonists are always, to a certain degree, selling out on their own terms. You know what I mean? It's like how do you walk that line of how do you sell out on your own terms, essentially? You know, and they can't. They never truly can.
And to what degree will you hate yourself? To what degree will you shoot yourself in the reflection like Pat Garrett? Or to what degree will you, quite literally take on an entire private army knowing that it's suicide? And it seems like one of those things where it's a little bit like a dog chasing a car, where Peckinpah's chasing success, he's chasing financial security, hating himself every step of the way, filled with self-loathing. And he had the talent and the ability to deliver hit movies like The Getaway, but you almost get the sense that like he despised himself for it. And like what he really wanted was just like the struggle and the soul searching, and to have all these adversaries and have the whole world kind of rising up against him. And that even like, he's one of those guys who would always snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, given an opportunity to do so. But periodically along the way, even if he was almost trying to willfully get in his own way, he would give us these amazing movies, unlike anything you've ever seen. And I think Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, my only criticism would be that like the first time you see it, it will seem a little like subdued or muted at times, where like during scenes where you expect, like big music or big sound, like I had to turn my TV up to like 80% to its max just to hear the scene with Chris Christopherson. It's like, did he deliberately do it this quiet, or was like the problem like in the lab and the processing? Like, who knows? But it is a very quiet movie until it isn't, and then like in the last third, it's fucking bananas.
Yeah. Well, it's always the thing, like I said, of like, yeah, how do you sell out on your own terms? And the characters are so oftentimes missing the thing. They oftentimes sell out the thing that they truly love for this, more short-sighted goal. They sell their souls. And that's what he does. He thinks that this, that the money that he's going to get from desecrating this grave is gonna, it's gonna set them up, but then he loses everything. That's why he like Pat Garrett, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, who's dead at the beginning. In this film, he's dead. He comes out of a grave.
Quite literally,
once Alita dies, which is his fault, then he comes from the grave. Peckinpah said this film was like, it was about like something to the effect. He said some kind of line, I think in pre-production, when they were kind of working on the script, it's about the soul of female vengeance or something to that effect. And there is this current of female vengeance throughout the film, whether it's Amelia Fernandez's daughter, saying to kill him at the end, and all these other things. The women are the truly strong ones, and they have these kind of clowns, these idiot clowns around them, killing each other and destroying each other.
Although I agree with this premise, but there's one female who does not get a revenge, or who knows, maybe she does indirectly. But this is one of the most notorious clips from the movie, and we're not going to shy. Actually, I'm not going to show anything with nudity because that'll get me totally demonetized on YouTube, and we're not going to shy away from the rest of the details. So this is a moment that comes early on, which lets you know exactly what kind of movie you're seeing. So these hired killers have come to the bar. They're looking for Benny, or they're looking for any information related to Alfredo Garcia. They're talking to Benny, and the working girls kind of move in, seeing if they'd be interested. And this is what happens.
¿Quieres conmigo?
Some of the best beer in the world comes from Mexico.
Qué bueno estás.
So she doesn't get revenge directly. However, toward the end of the movie, those guys do go out. I mean, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, bail out now. Go watch the movie and come back. But those guys do get blown away in a hail of bullets. So I guess indirectly she does get she gets some payback.
Yeah, well, there's a few things about that. Like, I mean, the first thing is that it is kind of suggesting to you like what Peckinpah's subtly trying to communicate is that these two bounty hunter guys or whoever they are homosexual.
Yeah, they remind me a lot of Strother Martin and L.Q. Jones and Ballad of Cable Hogue and the Wild Bunch. Like they could have easily been brought these guys back to play these roles.
Yeah. So definitely something that he's kind of building on that kind of that idea to give them. But so like, yeah, they don't want female companionship. That's the first thing. I also think that maybe it might be something that, like that bar, I believe, was they scattered all these different locations in Mexico, and Peckinpah wasn't happy. He finally found that place. He's like, we don't even have to dress this set. Yeah. It's perfect.
Ready to run.
And supposedly that bar owner had everyone was kind of warning him, Mexican crew and everything that knew the area. It's like, this guy is kind of nuts. There's rumor he killed a lady here and bribed officials and stuff, so he didn't serve much time or any time. So that might be sort of like, Peckinpah is sort of a reference, like, these guys, this is an area where you can kind of get away with whatever the fuck you want. So I don't know if that's a reference to that or what, but obviously I think the very surface level thing is just kind of communicating these guys aren't in it for the ladies.
Yeah, they're in it for the money, as they make abundantly clear in this fantastic interaction with Benny.
Well, don't worry. If he's alive, I'll find him.
Well, alive isn't our problem.
Well, how about dead or alive? How about that?
Dead. Just dead.
And I love Gig Young in this. He's such an angel of death and so hardcore and so ruthless. And I love how he introduces himself to Benny as Fred C. Dobbs. So I stole his name. His name's not Fred C. Dobbs in the movie, but for people out there who are Bogey enthusiasts or John Huston enthusiasts, Fred C. Dobbs was the character played by Bogey in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And I feel like Treasure of the Sierra Madre and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia are both kind of tough to define in terms of their genre, but they might be the two best entries in that genre that I've ever seen, where it's not a Western. It's kind of modern day, but people are in Mexico looking for fame and fortune and have to kind of compromise their soul along the way. So I feel like, yeah, if you're looking for a cool double feature of Mexican adventure movies, it's tough to beat those two flicks.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that at length in just a second. But back to the thing about the female vengeance in this film is that this is the last half of the film, or the last last third of the film maybe, is something of a revenge film. Once Alita dies and everything, but unlike a Death Wish or unlike so many revenge films where this female character is just in the first 5 minutes or so, you don't really get to know them as a character, and whatever happens to them is less about what happens to them and more so what happens to the protagonist and all that and everything. But the thing is, Peckinpah would never do anything that simple, that straightforward.
He makes you fall in love with her first. She's fascinating.
Not only does he make you fall in love with her, but he makes you understand that her death and everything is the result of him, as a result of Benny. It's not that some kind of force of nature, something outside of their control came in, disrupted their harmony. You know what I mean? He is responsible. It's his fault. So the revenge
tells him repeatedly, we have each other, that's enough. And he's like, no, it's not. It takes bread. It takes dinero. And I love the way he says dinero. His pronunciation of Spanish, I mean, finally it's only to be desired, but I love his pronunciation of Spanish words like finito, dinero, and that sort of thing. He has a great accent. But just to give you a taste of Isela Vega and how lovely and angelic she is in this movie, my favorite moment of the movie featuring her is right here.
Arbolito, arbolito, me siento sola. Quiero que me acompañes.
I mean, Sam's got a pretty gnarly reputation, but if you watch scenes like that, or scenes like in the Ballad of Cable Hogue, it seems like, yeah, if you've got a beautiful girl and a little bit of music and a little bit of booze, that is all that you need for bliss and happiness. And yeah, these are some of the most, I think, moving and romantic and loving and affectionate scenes that Peckinpah ever shot. And so when she inevitably gets buried alive right alongside him, I mean, it just rips your fucking soul right out of you. I mean, it's an amazing performance by Isela Vega. And yeah, I think she's fantastic in this flick.
Yeah, she is great. And so, sorry, I keep jumping around,
Jump as much as you like. This is your video to do with as you like.
But Gig Young is great in the film. His agent was Martin Baum, who was like the producer of the film. I don't think he produced too many films, but the satirist comedian Mort Saul was going to play that role and had to drop out because their production got delayed. And so that I think Gig Young, who was not getting hired, even though he had won an Academy Award.
he was getting hired and then fired, like on Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
Which came out the
Okay.
same
Yeah.
year. He got hired to do that. And the scene where he's in the jail cell hanging upside down, which is ultimately played by Gene Wilder, all this green goo started coming out of him. And they're like, what's going on here? Like, I don't think he's acting. I think he's having like the DTs, but serious boozer, major health risk. He had to drop out of Blazing Saddles, but at least he got to do this, which I guess placed fewer demands on his busy schedule.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, I guess we won't get too much into his personal life.
Well, he died by a murder-suicide, notoriously, only a few years later. I mean, he was haunted by a million demons, but I think of all the kind of psychotic features on a person's face while committing acts of violence in the history of Peckinpah, a strong contender for the most disturbing is Gig Young's face toward the end of the movie when he's unleashing that machine gun. And I have a little clip of it right here.
Well, we found it. It's right here. We're going to have to make our move now.
I mean, that smile and the way his face is totally contorted. He really, if anything, he might out Peckinpah in terms of really finding that that demon at the core of his character.
Well, he out Peckinpah in real life. We'll say that.
Totally.
But
Peckinpah's like, dude, like, maybe you should drink less.
Yeah, but yeah, and then also him naming the character Fred C. Dobbs, which, you know, obviously, yeah, Treasure of Sierra Madre, John Huston. I mean, John Huston was a huge influence on Peckinpah. And Treasure of Sierra Madre, you could see it in the Wild Bunch. It's all through the Wild Bunch. He keeps making allusions to it and everything. And this, some people have kind of commented, maybe it's a little too self-referential or whatever, because they always talk about the greed and Mexico and everything. But to me, it's like the character is making a joke because they're searching for a head. Fred C. Dobbs is one of the most famous film characters who gets decapitated. Yeah. No one ever mentions that he is a headless. Fred C. Dobbs is a headless guy. So of course the character would make that kind of joke. You know, it's not just Peckinpah just doing a just a reference, but.
And Huston was one of the only filmmakers that I ever saw Peckinpah saying nice things about. I think on the website Cinephilia and Beyond reading an old interview from I think 72 or 73, and he was being asked about different directors, and he was saying a lot of dismissive things about a lot of legends and luminaries. But when he got to the subject of Huston, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he essentially said that Huston was always in the act of becoming a better filmmaker, and that if he could model himself on a similar trajectory, he would like to follow the same trajectory as Huston, where you just keep getting better and better. Because by the 1970s, Huston was like in a second golden age and really firing on all cylinders. So I get why Peckinpah would really look up to him.
Yeah, and then also just Huston, just the way he lived his life is obviously something that, you know, probably Peckinpah wanted. It's very that Hemingway artist, adventurer kind of role, you know.
Yeah, big game hunter, big fox hunter, womanizer, big time gambler, making great movies, and also just reinventing himself decade after decade. Huston is one of the giants.
Yeah, and then also I know that Peckinpah, I believe, for a long time wanted to adapt Under the Volcano, and that Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is something of his version of Under the Volcano.
Yeah, that would be a good double feature.
Yeah, and then of course Huston later made Under the Volcano, another great movie about a drunk white dude in Mexico.
Maybe the best. I mean, it is that scene where Albert Finney's found face down on a road. It's some of the best kind of drunken explanations I've ever seen by a very eloquent actor. But yeah, everybody should definitely hunt down that flick. It goes to the dark side. Fewer machine guns than in Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, but still circling the drain of the human spirit. But yeah, I guess what is a good term for describing these kinds of movies where, you know, people go down to Mexico seeking fame and fortune and encounter death and betrayal?
Ooh, I don't know. You can't hit me with these kind of questions.
Yeah, these like, you know, we'll have to come up with a proper term for this subgenre, because as you watch more and more of these, they do start to feel like a subgenre. But I think one of the greatest tricks Peckinpah ever pulled was with the little pump fake toward the beginning of the movie, where initially you feel like you might be watching a different movie. It almost looks like an outtake from Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the movie he shot just before this. And there's a beautiful shot toward the beginning, which I want to play right now. I mean, you see that and you don't really know where you are, what the time period is. And then obviously then one of the most jarring cuts you've ever seen in the history of Peckinpah is after she's had her arm broken by her father's goons and had to volunteer the name of who impregnated her. Then you see, like, you know, these motorcycles taking off, these cars taking off, like an entire army being mobilized, planes flying, but it almost becomes like a Mel Brooks joke, like just how many forces are mobilized at his behest to go hunt this dude down. But it's a remarkable opening and all in Spanish, apart from, I think, maybe one sentence with the great Emilio Fernandez.
Por favor, un millón al que me traiga la cabeza de Alfredo Garcia. Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia. Tráiganmela.
I mean, bringing back all the Wild Bunch familiar faces. There are a bunch of alumni from his past movies popping up here and there, but obviously, got the great Mapache himself doing his thing.
Yeah. Shit. What was I gonna say? I was about to talk, and then you got a clip. You got so many fucking clips, man.
Yeah, I went a little crazy. I got just while I was getting prepared for this, I got really excited. But I was, I guess maybe you were responding to the Lakeside clip of his daughter and comparing to Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Oh yeah.
Of the raft scene, or the scene where Billy is riding and you can see his reflection in the water below him.
Yeah, it starts. You go in and it looks like an 1800s Western, you know. And then suddenly you're like, what time period am I in? And then suddenly it adds this montage, like you said, of the planes and everything. It looks like something out of like It's a Mad World or something, you know. And that's what's interesting about this movie is that it works on these kind of meta levels, and Peckinpah did meta shit, not in the way like of a Leone, who's they describe as one of the very first like postmodern directors, who's basically a filmmaker who makes films about films, much like Tarantino. And I don't think Peckinpah was that, but he still would make references to movies and homages and stuff. And this is a strange film because the pulpy nature of the plot, the title, and these shifts in tone, where these kind of in jokes like that, which is maybe a little bit like kind of similar to what Peckinpah did maybe at like the beginning of The Wild Bunch, which was Lee Marvin's idea of starting. You see these soldiers come into town, they bump into a lady, drops her purse, "Pardon me, ma'am," and you're like, okay, who are these soldiers? And then they come in, if they move, kill them, you know, sort of that kind of twist on you. But this is even bigger than that. This is even more developed than that. And so you have Peckinpah in one way going almost at his most pulpy, but his most true too. And so the concept for the film, it started with Frank Kowalski in 1969. And his idea was a mafia don, didn't take place in Mexico. And it was called Bring Me the Head of Someone Else's Name.
Like an Italian name.
Yeah, some Italian guy, I would assume. Giuseppe Colazzo or whatever. He had told Peckinpah while he was working on the Ballad of Cable Hogue, Frank Kowalski, the idea. And Peckinpah said, that's great. And he kind of started developing it with it. He had another writer, I can't remember that guy's name, but eventually it got developed in Gordon Dawson, who started as a costume guy on like The Wild Bunch and a bunch of Peckinpah's other movies. He started kind of moving up, and he cracked the script with Peckinpah, and he said he just wrote parody Peckinpah.
Gotcha.
When he was writing it, like he was just like, he's like, the easiest script I've ever written. It was just a parody of Peckinpah's movies, like all this stuff, and the movie has that. And it's almost like similar to the way like Warren Oates doing a Peckinpah impression. It's like Gordon Dawson was doing a Peckinpah impression in the script. But even then, Peckinpah still finds something deeper, something more real. But like you were saying, what's interesting about the movie is, like you were saying, in its execution, is that and this is probably because it was smaller budget, probably a tighter schedule and other things. But it also might be part of Peckinpah's own decline as a filmmaker.
Yeah, they said that he was increasingly fragile while making this, where everybody this is the first time people looked at him like, ooh, like he's a little frail, he's aging. Whereas up through Pat Garrett, it seemed like he still had a lot of his youthful vitality. But this is when the health really started to go into a rapid decline.
Yeah, and Gordon Dawson talks about, and that might just be because Gordon Dawson wrote it. You know, a writer's always going to be somewhat disappointed in the execution of how something is done. But he does talk about how much Pat Garrett had kind of broken him, and how Peckinpah was just not at the top of his game in the making of the movie. And I to a certain degree I can agree with that, like to a certain degree.
You can concede that this is not the man who made the Wild Bunch, but at the same time, I feel like he's so raw and broken from his experiences on Pat Garrett. It's almost like he's ready to make this dark, tragic, bitter movie. You know, like these lines, like nobody loses all the time. Like, well, he just lost big with one of his big passion projects that got taken away from him and horribly ravaged. And I feel like, yeah, it's hard to be a successful, healthy person and make a movie like Alfredo Garcia as convincingly as Peckinpah does. He needed to fail before he made it.
Well, you look at it and you wonder, you go, how much of this is Peckinpah knowing what he's doing, you know, as a filmmaker, as a great filmmaker? How much is it knowing that he's on a smaller film and he's not going to be able to work in the same way that he did on bigger productions? Because I think one of the things about this movie that people maybe should know going in is, with its title, knowing it's a Peckinpah film, knowing the subject matter, knowing its very pulpy title, I think maybe people might go in expecting like just the craziest fucking thing you've ever seen in your life, you know, and it's really not that.
It has little dashes here and there, but ultimately it's a very like sad and moving, contemplative movie at times.
Yeah, but it's like also like just watching it, like I think that well, it's like when you watch the film and you think about like when he's thinking back to like Alita after she's died, and Peckinpah does it all with just like audio, like her singing and him thinking back and stuff. And when you watch just a year before with Pat Garrett, or when you watch even The Getaway, The Getaway is not even close to my favorite Peckinpah. It's way down for me, but I think on terms of like a technical level, a stylistic level, that might be his apex.
Yeah, it's a big smash hit as well.
Well, just the material I don't think is that great, honestly. But what Peckinpah does with like montage, with his editing, with that first sequence in the jail, or jumping into the water hole and stuff, like he's really like giving you these really amazing subjective montages. And you go to Alfredo Garcia and you go, wait, where was that director? Or even in Pat Garrett, the cutting back and forth, or even later on when he does Cross of Iron, which is very sloppy and definitely not one of his best films. But in that, he still is using montages of it, and he doesn't do that here. And is it that he was so tired, he just didn't engage? Did he know his budget wasn't there? Or did he go, I don't need to do that. I have Warren Oates. I'm just going to show you Warren Oates in these long, like on rugged takes, and I'm going to put some audio and just let him do his thing. I don't know. It works for the film, but it is a fascinating thing. And that's the same thing about the violence in the movie. This, despite the subject matter, it's one of his, well, I don't want to say it was one of his least bloody movies, but it's not as bloody or violent or anything that you'd expect.
25 people are killed, but it's not like you're not reveling in the bloodletting the way you do like in the climax to The Getaway.
Yeah, and I've always realized that, and I've always thought, because I feel Peckinpah, despite being this guy known for violence, had an idea about balance. Like he didn't want to have an oppressive experience to the audience, you know. And I think he knew that this movie is so dirty and so gritty, and just the subject matter alone, similar to like Straw Dogs, it's like you don't have to have all the bloodletting. It doesn't have to be as gory.
Yeah, it's traumatizing enough.
Yes, but the other thing is, looking back again too, is I believe it was before the production, Peckinpah wrote a letter to the MPAA like,
I saw you tweeting about this.
Yes, yeah, hoping for a PG rating for the film. I believe this was before he started shooting. I don't think it was after. And they wrote back to him like, "This might get an X, dude."
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was part of it.
Probably due to bits like this. I had to be very careful about which part of the clip I included due to avoiding nudity, but it has some frank sexual content. So not only do you get treated to the sight of Warren Oates, who's officially becoming a skinny fat guy, like when a skinny guy suddenly is old enough where they have a bit of like a punch. But if you watch the whole clip, he wakes up and realizes that his lady love has given him crabs, and he's breaking them apart and kind of killing them with like booze in his fingernails, and rushes into the bathroom. But I love how while he's discovering that he's infested with this STD, she's like reaching over and lovingly caressing him, like you know, after an evening of like lovemaking. I just love that contrast of like the intimacy and the love and the affection, while he's horrified by probably catching crabs from Alfredo Garcia, who's been banging her until, you know, pretty recently. And so just like those contrasts. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the MPAA was considering slapping an X, because back then X, it didn't mean porn the way it did. I guess by 74 it kind of did, but like in the late 60s, X meant midnight cowboy. It meant adults only and that sort of thing, kind of what NC-17 did in the early 90s. So yeah, X, R, and PG were your only options. There wasn't a PG-13, and so he was kind of in a no man's land.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think that when you watch the film, and there are plenty of gunfights, plenty of killing in the movie, but like just like the squibs themselves are so less bloody.
Yeah, like
it's like these are very small. Honestly, probably, like I've worked in forensics, they're probably more realistic to what a bullet would actually do, instead of these huge geysers of blood. But yeah, you go in expecting Peckinpah's "Bring Me the Head" of Alfredo Garcia to just be, you know, just these Verhoeven style, just big, huge squibs, and it's not like it's a bloodless movie, but comparatively to even something like The Getaways, I think much bloodier than that. And then he would go back to it with Cross of Iron with these huge squibs and everything. But I honestly feel that letter
ninjas.
And Ninja. Well, that's not the Cross of Iron. Killer Elite.
Oh, sorry, not Cross of Iron. I was thinking of Killer Elite. Sorry.
Well, that one did get a PG. So, you know,
Killer Elite got a PG.
Yeah, and so did and that one has boobs and stuff. So, but so I think that Peckinpah kind of just knew that just the oppressive subject matter and everything. He was like, let's go lighter on the gore on this one. You never see the severed head. They did a whole molding and casting, and
people, you just see the bag and the flies, and that's all you need. Like here's one of the grossest shots of the movie, but there's no gore in sight.
¿Dónde está mi cerveza, señora? Rápido, por favor.
And that's all you need. Like Peckinpah loves putting children in weird situations where they're like, you know, setting on fire scorpions and ants, or swinging on the scaffold, or what? Not the scaffold. The gallows, swinging on the gallows in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, or just a little innocent kid discovering a decapitated head in the back of a car covered in flies. But it's just so fucking disgusting. But yeah, you never see the head. You can only, and as he starts like adding dry ice to it and like pouring booze on it to cover up the smell, you can only imagine how disfigured and deformed and bloated it must be becoming.
Yeah, it's like you know, it's like that quote from like Brian De Palma, like, I get penalized for my violence because I do violence well, you know, and that people do probably come away from this movie thinking it's just the grittiest, nastiest movie, and it is. And like you said, that crab scene, which is, I remember first watching this movie, I rented it on VHS when I started getting into Peckinpah, and it looked so off, like on a pen and scan, just shitty VHS transfer. It looked way dirtier and filthier than you probably even intended. And I just remember being like, whoa, like the crab scene, I was just blown away.
Well, it
them putting
reminds me of
something like that.
one of my college roommates' favorite jokes about the best cure for crabs. I think I've told you this before, but are you aware of the best cure for crabs?
Isn't that in they show that in The Master, right? It's like an old veterans thing.
Oh, well,
Set-
yeah, well, the joke
you
I've
set
always
your-
heard is you shave one testicle and you set the other one on fire, and then you
Yeah.
stab them with an ice pick as they jump
Yes.
from one ball to the other. So, is that the joke they used in The Master?
Yes, yes, yes,
Fantastic.
yeah, exactly. Which I think a lot came from. I think that might have been a story that Paul Thomas Anderson got from Jason Robards.
Gotcha.
And to tie it back into this movie, Warren Oates was the person that came to Peckinpah with the script for The Ballad of Cable Hogue.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so when he cast Jason Robards, he felt he owed Warren Oates one, and so when
That's
this
fair.
material, so when this material came to Peckinpah first, he wanted to cast James Coburn or Peter Falk, and they both read the script and turned it down. So then he was like, "I gotta take it to Warren," like he
was born to play this. I mean, around this time, he was doing the best work of his career in movies like Two Lane Blacktop and Cockfighter, and as you mentioned before, Dillinger. But this is the movie that he was put on this. I mean, I love him as one of the Gorches. He's one of the most hilariously stupid, lethal, badass motherfuckers in movie history in The Wild Bunch. But the part of Benny is what he was born to play.
Well, he said in terms of personal gratification, this was his favorite. Terms of like his favorite actual overall movie, it was The Wild Bunch. And Warren Oates had big problems with this movie, and he was really hesitant about certain things. And once it came out, kind of promoted it, but didn't want to. I don't think he was super happy, and he had big problems. He had big fights with Peckinpah, but he had big problems with two scenes: the crab scene. He said it destroyed the dramatic engine. He really didn't like the crab. He told, I think, his girlfriend at the time, like, don't see it. I think he told his son, like, don't see it.
Probably just didn't want to get jealous.
then,
He's spending half the movie with this beautiful Mexican lady.
And then also the Chris Christopherson, Donnie Fritz biker kind of rape scene, which is, one of those scenes too, where you're like, ooh, and you go on some level. I think people watch it and go like, "Is this like Peckinpah playing through like his own weird pathology, doing a little bit of a Straw Dogs thing?" That's what I mean.
Well, like Straw Dogs, he gives us a rape scene that is very complicated and it's hard to sum up in one or two sentences. And also, there's like weird bits of humor kind of scattered in there as well. So I might as well play that as long as we're on the subject of this notorious scene.
I think I'll just borrow yours. Ay.
It's all right, Benny. It's all right.
You two guys are definitely on my shit list.
I mean, that line, the first time I heard it, even though the scene is very grim and very disturbing, when he says, "You guys are definitely on my shit list." I mean, it was a room full of frat guys watching this, and we exploded with laughter. Like the idea that he would say that when confronted with these goddamn bikers about to drag away his girl, but also just the fact that I can't remember her exact phrasing, but she says, like, "I've been here before and you don't know the way." The way she very calmly and confidently asserts, like, if we're going to get out of this, if we're going to survive this, like, leave it to me. And so she's off with Christopherson while he's left with the guy whose private parts nearly got tickled, and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, playing his guitar. And so ultimately Warren Oates does end up getting a gun and taking these guys out. But you can tell that he's Ella Vega's character. She's well on her way to kind of handling it in her own way. And like that, she slaps Christopherson twice. He slaps her once. And then he kind of walks off to sulk and brood. And then she comes over and she's almost comforting him in her own way. And anyway, you can tell she's trying to basically say, like, I'm going to give you what you want, but we're going to avoid the violence and murder. Or at least you can tell she's trying to steer it in that direction. But yeah, it's not a scene that provides easy explanations or easy like off ramps or exit ramps. You got to really kind of wrestle with it.
Yeah. Well, you cannot be a passive viewer with a Peckinpah film, and because he cultivated his image as this guy who was so macho, so into like violence, and and had so much substance abuse and was so erratic and everything. that I think it's easy for people to look at his films and read them as, you know, this sort of caveman kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, just
dominate
nothing
power.
but like murder and rape fantasies writ large by a very talented director.
Yes, exactly. A guy is talented, but it's just like a, you know, and it's like, well, that's obviously not what he's doing. But I remember when I first rented this, you know, I was like a teenager seeing his other films. I'm like, what the fuck is this scene? You know, a lot of people, this is their breaking point, because it is very, but it's very, it can be very confusing if you're only trying to digest this movie as a simple action film or revenge film or crime movie, and it has these very deep things about it. And yeah, and Alita is a high class prostitute, not that, you know, and so she knows how to handle these things. And Christopherson slapping her, she slaps him back like, you're not going to be able to physically dominate me. I'm stronger than you on at least this level. And that takes like the juice out of him, right?
Yeah, if anything, he might be unable to perform. Like he kind of wander, like you don't quite know, like, why is he wandering away from her and sitting down to sulk? And it's like, is he looking for sympathy? Is he like, once again, is he unable to get it up? Like you don't, it's a very complex scene. And also with almost no dialogue. So you got to interpret it all just from the actor's body language. And yeah, and also the scene is so quiet. Like I said, I had to turn my TV up to like nearly to max just to hear what was going on. And I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but in a weird way, it makes the scene all the more disturbing because you don't have like big foreboding music telling you what to think. You just see the scene unfold.
Well, it's like they say, you know, like, I don't know how I should be even saying, but they say like,
what were you about to say?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm going to say what I'm going to say.
But like, you know, like they say in terms of like sexual, it's more so a power thing than like a sexual gratification thing.
Yeah, a violent crime instead of a sexual crime. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think because what she knows, she sees that this is not a man with any true power. You know what I mean? He's trying to assert himself. She's way more powerful than him, but she also knows like, okay, if I get in this guy's good graces, you know what I mean? You know, I can potentially seduce him, you know, because, you know, so that she doesn't have to, you know, fuck Donnie Fritz too. Yeah. You know, it doesn't become
basically
something
the
more
alpha
violent.
At that point will become protective of her and not let his friend in on the action, etc. Like she knows she's playing to the male psyche very, very successfully.
Yes, and she also knows her dumbass, you know, boyfriend, fiance, I guess, is not going to be able to, you know. So like, she's trying to save herself and him too. Like, let's, you know, try to. And so when he actually does get the drop on him, when he goes there, he's coming into it as a seduction scene where he can misinterpret it like, what the fuck, you know what I mean?
He walks up on him and it looks like they're just making love in the weeds, just like caressing each other. And it's like, yeah, for a second, he kind of pauses and then blows him away.
Exactly. And so later on, you know, it's in the aftermath when he like reveals his plan and everything, and you know, she goes in the shower.
He's still wrestling with his feelings of jealousy over the fact that she and Alfredo Garcia spent 3 days together, quote unquote, saying goodbye. So to find her in another situation where she's been affectionate with another man, he's wrestling with a lot of internal torment.
Exactly, and that's the thing that Peckinpah does is he leaves it for the audience too to also have that sort of thing, and to where he doesn't complete it for you. He doesn't answer it for you to where it makes you're in the same place of Benny where you're like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, unless you're really truly trying to engage and really think it through, you're also in that place. And so, you know, and yeah, so that's another important aspect. And Peckinpah does, it's yeah, he is he just is, he's working it through himself too, you know what I mean? Like Peckinpah doesn't ever come to this stuff as like a fully easy answer.
And I think that's the best way to do it. Like any filmmaker has all the answers before they start shooting. Well, then why do you even need to make the movie? Like I feel like if you're totally prepared, well then it's like it can quickly lose all interest. I like how he's exploring these topics in the process of telling the story.
Yeah, yeah. Every Peckinpah movie is an open sore.
Yeah, he's like, let me look at the rot within my soul. But that's what it's. But it's so fucking authentic, and it's so honest, and it's so, like I always say, savage poetry is always my favorite way to describe Peckinpah, because it's so elegiac and so beautiful and so stylish and so unique in its visual interpretation of the story. But at the same time, he's going to explore elements of the human psyche and the soul and the spirit that other filmmakers would never go within a million miles of. And so that's what makes him stand alone in his corner of the filmmaking world.
Yeah, well, and that's also why it kind of throws people off, is because you're like, get to the Alfredo Garcia thing. What is this? What is this weird midsection? But it's like a dramatization of that relationship between the two of them, where he can't, you know what I mean? He's never fully committed himself to her.
And I love how she's there to kind of remind him, like, what you're about to do is sacrilegious. What you're about to do is a sin. What you're about to do is truly unholy. And they have some fantastic exchanges as he doesn't like basically say, hey, baby, I got an idea. We're going to travel to this small town and dig up your old lover and chop his head off and turn it in for 10 grand. He kind of teases out bits of the story as they go, and she becomes increasingly aware of like what is like this romantic rendezvous of theirs he's got other goals in mind, which leads to this hilarious exchange.
I take him proof. His head.
His head?
For proof!
But it's a crime, Benny. You're mad.
He's dead! Shut up!
And that seems so funny. We lost David. He must be on the floor. But I love how rather than try to win the argument, he just says, he's dead. Shut up.
Shut up.
Because, yeah, he is hell bent upon this. And then he goes on to explain kind of his rationale, which is actually kind of a compelling argument in its own twisted way when he says this.
The church cuts off the feet, fingers, any other goddamn thing from the saints, don't they? Well, what the hell? Alfredo's our saint. He's a saint of our money. And I'm gonna bar a piece of him.
And I just feel like you could probably see Peckinpah having these conversations with friends and collaborators about like what it's going to take to get a movie made, or like this idea that if you are willing to sell just a small piece of your soul, then it can lead to prosperity and success, but like some promised land that he's ultimately going to hate when he ultimately gets there. But once again, I feel like as a metaphor for the journey of a filmmaker, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is like, it's the perfect examination of the soul searching that somebody as haunted as Peckinpah probably would have felt throughout the entire creative process as you're having to make one compromise after another to try to achieve your vision.
Yeah, and you know, there's I could be wrong. You watched it 3 times recently, right? He first reveals the totality of his plan after she's been raped, right?
Well, after the attempted, yes. So they're driving away, and he starts to starts to explain what's going down and why they're on this mission. Because beforehand, she thinks, oh, we're just on a road trip to this small town that you know, it's just going to be like, you know, like I said, a romantic rendezvous. We're just like a 2 or 3 day road trip. Yeah, he's got 4 days to get this proof or this evidence, or the bad guys are going to come looking for him.
Yeah, well, and so that's why it's so interesting. The multifaceted way that Peckinpah goes about it is because after what happens to her, you know, in the hotel room, getting the room, they won't let her in. She wants the fanciest room, and he fights for her, and she goes in the shower and everything. And that's kind of where the first time that he says to her, like, I love you, without being prompted, right?
Yeah. And
so there's a thing where it's like, this has gotten serious. Because of what's happened, he's more willing to do that. But also it's balanced because there's something in him, whether or not he realizes it fully, is that after this attempted rape, it's when he's like, he kind of, proposes it to her, like, we don't have to deal with this shit anymore. You were going to be set. You know what I mean? We don't have to deal with these bikers trying to rape you and all this stuff. And then when she's in the shower and he says he loves her and everything, there's these very weird shots for Peckinpah. They're her POV, They're very subjective shots of Warnock's, and they're shot in a way where his face is so distorted.
Yeah.
And Warnock's has already got a fascinating face. That's why I draw
It's almost
him.
like an unintentionally comedic portrayal. Like, look at this big, lovesick buffoon who's totally smitten by her.
Yeah, big lips and you know what I mean. But
he does that thing where he's a master of raising up his eyebrows in the middle and kind of creating that wrinkled forehead, but it makes him look all the more comical at times.
Yeah, and but Peckham, but so it's like you get this. She's seeing this man who's like, I love you, and she loves him, but it's a distorted kind of carnival mirror, you know what I mean? And he is still like, it hasn't like jarred him to reality, you know what I mean? It's just one more thing that makes it more important that he does this shit that's gonna ultimately destroy them. And I think Peckinpah would not shoot Warren at that angle, with his lips in the foreground in a close-up that way, if he didn't know that it was going to give this. And that's why it's always hard to get a handle on this movie and where these characters are at and everything. It's it feels so pulpy and so simple and so straightforward on one level, but it's so, fucked up and weird.
Wade's finding all this hidden depth and romanticism and lyricism and just like real darkness kind of in between the lines of what would ordinarily be kind of a trashy disposable bestseller that you would pick up at an airport or at a newsstand with some lurid cover. You read it, you forget about it, throw it over your shoulder, and you're like, oh yeah, that's that story that had that crazy cover that I read, while at the beach one day. He really forces you to kind of find the hidden meaning in what would otherwise be just kind of a throwaway piece of disposable genre entertainment. And I love it when one of the world's greatest filmmakers kind of goes slumming and makes a low budget, down and dirty genre film, which is exactly what it is, but he can't help but still make it into a Peckinpah movie.
Yeah, exactly. What was I going to say? I had something interesting to say.
Well, I'll give you 2 minutes to think about it because I had too much coffee before we started recording. So I'm going to start my 2-minute wrong reel urination break, and we'll be right back with you. Alrighty, Mr. Lambert, have you thought of what was burning a hole in your brain earlier?
Yes, I have. Give me a second.
Are you caught in a state of undress like one of the bad guys in this movie when we see him getting a pedicure? That's one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, where Benny comes back with the head, and this evil bastard is sitting there on the couch. He's got his fingers wrapped up in a girl's hair, and he's reading a Time magazine article about Richard Nixon in the other hand, and he's in his boxers and his pants are on his ankles as they're doing his toes. But anyway, it's just like I feel like that's a great portrayal of like Peckinpah's idea of true evil, like a guy in a suit getting a pedicure in some strange office. And I feel like you can almost kind of read between the lines and think like, what does Peckinpah think of the financiers of his movies or the executives he has to deal with to get his movies green lit? And they're always calling him a loser. And there's this great line he says when they accuse him of being a loser, which I'll share right now.
You're interested in money, aren't you? Money you can spend.
Yes, sir. Indirectly. I mean, there are other things like I'd like to stay alive.
I'm a loser.
Nobody loses all the time.
All the scenes in that room, like there are two big scenes in that room, I just find them absolutely fascinating in terms of the portrayal of these guys, how they operate, what their code is like, and Benny's attitude. Nobody loses all the time, which I know is a line that Tony Stella likes quite a bit. And as I was thinking before, I almost like reached out to him beforehand. I was like, Tony, like, what should we talk about? Because this is a movie that Tony really likes, and I just find it interesting that two artists that I know, you and Tony Stella, who love creating like art related to movies, are both very preoccupied with this movie, which I think says something. I don't know what it says, but it is interesting that people who are interested in the visual arts are also strangely drawn toward this haunting movie. But what was it you were about to say before I played the 2-minute pee break Shadowrun music?
Oh, now that I think of it, I don't think it was that interesting.
Gotcha.
But no, but there is something about like this film and also like Straw Dogs. I feel that that with this film, and I know this gets kind of referenced as like a modern Western, and I guess I'm the Western guy, but
it seems like to me like when people say modern Western, you regard it as a bit of an oxymoron. Like there's no such thing. Like the Western is a period, not a style. And obviously this movie takes place in the 70s. It's not a Western. Does it feel like it has some Western ingredients? Sure. It's got some beautiful visuals and that sort of thing. But yeah, this is a down and dirty crime film from the 1970s.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Western is it's a period and a style. But I think that when Peckinpah does something like Straw Dogs or like this, there's obviously still the setting and the culture and everything related to it, but I think in terms of maybe psychology, he can focus it, maybe go a bit deeper into the fucked up recesses of your mind in terms of psychology that he doesn't necessarily do in his Westerns. I mean, he gets there, but not. I don't think as far as Straw Dogs or Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. And I think it might be because those movies have like the weight of history on them too. Peckinpah is not only engaging in his characters, not only engaging in genre, but also engaging in history, and there's just a lot of things. And so when he has that weight lifted from him, it's more so, especially in this film, it's more so, this is just like, in a way, Peckinpah in his own mind. It's still portrayal of Mexico and everything, but it's Peckinpah's idea of Mexico. This is in a way, and it's why I think it has so many fans and everything, is that this is a very pure picture of Peckinpah's mind. I think the only reason that I think it doesn't get quite to the top of Peckinpah's movies, like The Wild Bunch, I think is his best. Pat Garrett is my favorite. But Ride the High Country, obviously, Straw Dogs and everything. I might put this on the level of Straw Dogs, but I would put it under The Wild Bunch, under Ride the High Country, under Pat Garrett.
Yeah. To me, it's like when Orson Welles made The Trial. It's not his best movie, but he had complete and total freedom to do whatever the hell he wanted. And it came at a similar point in his career where he was kind of running out of options. And I feel like you know, an artist obviously is going to like the movie where they had to make the fewest compromises. And so I love The Trial. It's not as good as Touch of Evil, which is compromise. It's not as good as like Magnificent Amberson, which is compromise. It's not as good as Citizen Kane. And same thing here. Ride the High Country is a better made movie, but it's not as personal as this. And so, yeah, if you really want to see the darkness in Sam's soul, this is the movie.
Yeah, well, it's like, but what I'm saying is the reason for me that it doesn't rank up there is because I just feel like on an aesthetic level, Peckinpah is not at his height.
No,
you know, and in the defense of the film, I don't necessarily think it needs him to be at that level to work to be a great movie. You know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like his energy was put in a different place, but at the same time, I can understand why people think he was started to slip here, you know. And it's almost like
if you didn't have any knowledge of what came after, perhaps that evidence would be less self-evident. But knowing how his life and his career would kind of rapidly deteriorate after this point, it's easier in hindsight to say, "Ooh, yeah, you can see all the evidence." Because I would say like this, like I've seen this more times than Junior Bonner. I've seen it, and it's like, is Junior Bonner a better made movie because he was healthier and more productive at the time? I don't know, but I don't find Junior Bonner as interesting. But I agree that like you can start to see how he's just not the man that he used to be.
Yeah, but I would also say, and I like this a lot better than Junior Bonner, which I think is like, you know, whatever. It's a good movie, but I feel that even like later when you look at something like Cross of Iron, which is probably, you know, the last good Peckinpah movie. I still think Cross of Iron is good. And stylistically,
and he had to take a break from cocaine while making it. They say that due to the strict laws where they're shooting in Eastern Europe, he couldn't get access to cocaine, so he had to go back to just being a raging drunk, which kind of helped him for that movie. At least that's what some people say, because he wasn't on cocaine, he was just a raging alcoholic, that he was able to get kind of reclaim some of the greatness of the past. Whether or not that's true, who the hell knows?
Yeah, well, but the thing is, and I think Cross of Iron is not nearly as good of a movie as Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, but I do think in terms of like stylistically, and this might be just because Peckinpah was just trying to get, I mean, stylistically, I believe Cross of Iron, I was going to say it's like Peckinpah getting blood from a stone, but Cross of Iron is based on actually a really great novel and everything. So I'm not, but I feel that Cross of Iron, in terms of his montage, his battle scenes, everything, Peckinpah is in whatever state he was in, working overtime to trying to make that movie work, at least on an aesthetic level. And there are other flaws, and it's very sloppy, and he might not even be focused in the way he's trying to do it. Maybe he's even trying to fumble and doing all these stylistic things in a last gasp effort to go to his old hits. I don't know. I still think Crossfire is a very, very good movie. But
yeah, if you're interested in Peckinpah, you have to see it at some point. I think I've seen it either twice or 3 times. I'm not obsessed with it the way I am with a lot of other Peckinpah movies.
But what I'm saying is, what's interesting is to see where Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is in terms of Peckinpah's films, in terms of his use of montage and editing and stuff, because you do see him refining it from The Wild Bunch up to The Getaway. And then with Pat Garrett, you could kind of see an idea of what he wanted to do, and he never kind of was able to refine that. And then with Pat Garrett, with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, he almost drops a lot of that. It's almost like he's like, let's not even fuck around with that stuff. Like, let me almost tell this, not in the most simple way, but maybe in a more simple way than Peckinpah usually does. And then later when he gets back to something like Cross of Iron, he has all these different, very subjective shots of like the different veterans of the war, the, you know, handicap, you know, missing limbs and stuff, tearing apart all the food at the table. And it cuts back and forth between what's he seeing and what's he's imagining and stuff in a very sloppy way in Crossfire. but there's almost none of that in this movie. And
yeah, it feels almost like a first-person story in a lot of ways, where we see most of the movie from the point of view of Benny. Obviously, he's not in the opening scene when the daughter's asked to come before the father and like "Quién es el padre" and that sort of thing over and over again. Also, speaking of El Padre, I noticed that the Blu-ray has got some terrible subtitles. Where at one point when the bad guys and we're looking for an old compadre of ours, I mean, an old friend of ours, but the subtitles make it look as if they're saying like we're looking for the padre, like the father. Anyway, so there's some sloppy subtitles like learn to conjugate or translate compadre. But yeah.
I was thinking maybe they had padre two separate
no, they didn't get. But anyway, I just noticed they were messing that up just a little bit. But I think I'm catching some of your bug. I had some astonishing point that I was about to make, but then I interrupted myself. And now I don't recall. So usually that means it's time to show. Oh, actually, you know what? I was now remembered. When Warren Oates finally finds the guys who have hit him on the head with the shovel and taken the head, you get a little bit of his montage there when he shoots one. You see him kind of falling, but it's very subdued. Oh, and I was also talking about first person subjective. Yeah, like most of the movie comes from his point of view. And so if it's all going to be from like his point of view, as opposed to like a third party omniscient point of view, I guess it makes sense to have it be shot in a more straightforward style. Like you don't need to have 12 cameras filming simultaneously if everything more or less is going to be from Benny's point of view. And so, yeah, if this were a novel, every sentence would start with I, like I walked in the door and I saw so-and-so. Like, it feels like it would be a first person experience.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to talk, like, and it's like when you approach the film, you go, that's what it's like. You go, is this because Peckinpah was not at the top of his game, or was it because Peckinpah knew the limitations of the production and knew what the story needed and knew that he didn't have to go that route? It's one of those questions. But I would say to people, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is not the movie. In one way, it's exactly the movie you might expect it to be from Peckinpah, but in another way, it's not. You probably think that it's going to be the apex of his, his most violent, dirty shit. And he goes places he doesn't go in his other movies.
But he sneaks in a little heart as well. Like if you like Junior Bonner and if you like the Battle of the Cable Hogue, I think Battle of the Cable Hogue is better than Junior Bonner. But if you like his peaceful, more quiet films, he introduces a lot of those ingredients here, even if on the surface, I mean, one of Tony's favorite posters for the movie, it's just a guy with like a giant like machete going straight into the front and center in the image. It's like, oh, this is going to be a violent, savage, fucked up movie. And at times it can be. But the quiet moments are eerily compelling. But speaking of the big savage moments, I think it's got maybe the best freeze frame of his career when he finally puts his signature on the film, the final shot of the flick. And what I love about that right there is that it goes into this little montage of all the major performers that have appeared in the movie, introducing them all. But it almost feels like a weird 70s TV show, or like a made-for-TV show. Like something about those guys. The actor, hang on, I'm blanking on his name. Not Gig Young, but who plays his partner in crime?
Robert Weber?
Yeah, but he's like the quintessential 70s actor in terms of like his appearance and his attire and everything. But when this movie goes into like showing you who all the performers were in the film, I'm like, wait a second, did we just watch like a weird episode of like, like The Love Boat or something like that? Like it feels so achingly 70s, and it reminds me of all the TV shows that I was watching when I was a very young kid, because I was born in 76. We're almost up to the point now where I started becoming a consumer of media. But I love that last bit with just the gun barrel and his name, directed by Sam Peckinpah. It's almost like, even though I might have like pulled a fast one and given you more heart and humanity than you're expecting, it's still a bloody Sam Peckinpah type of flick.
Yeah. It's interesting because I know that they had questioned, like, does he get away? Does he not? What happens here? And I know, like,
yeah, he gets blown. Yeah, from my point of view, yeah, he gets blown away. I mean, we see him get hit like 100 fucking bullets. But in an early version of the script, he did get away.
Yeah, I mean in the script stage. I don't mean it's obvious he dies in the actual movie itself. But I know that Peckinpah was kind of, vacillating between what should it be. And I do feel that maybe there is another ending of this movie where he gets away and he has the money and it's just like it's meaningless. You know what I mean? He's got to live on in this pointless sort of existence. And there is some maybe some people could see it as him dying in a hail of bullets is just Peckinpah doing a Peckinpah. You know what I mean? He dies in a hail of bullets in the end because it's a Peckinpah movie. Fuck it. And I could kind of see that, but realizing, the imagery of him rising from the grave and realizing that that's where he sold it, that he's basically been dead this whole time since Alita has been killed. Yeah, that is kind of where the movie has to end. But it's not even done in terms of spectacle. And once again, that might be because Peckinpah was worried about an X and everything. The ending of the movie.
But what it reminds me of is when Pike, like in that great scene right after Mapache gets killed, and you have this great standoff, and everybody's sitting, and Ernest Borgnine's giving you that creepy laugh. And then William Holden looks up and just sees this German officer and just very deliberately kind of gets the action going again, knowing like we're going down in this battle. Like there's no walking away from this. And it's almost like he invites it. And it's very similar to when War Notes has been paid more money than he could have ever dreamed. Because while he's been working for 10 grand, he finally learns from his employers, oh, there's a much bigger pot. I'm working for the guys who are going for the big pot. And when Fernandez gives him that giant briefcase full of money, and then even after seeing it, he realizes, oh, like not only this is like 100 times the ticket out that I was anticipating. And he gets the action going again, nonetheless, and he gets the gunfight going. It's like he knows at this point he's run out of runway. This is where the road ends. Even if he's successfully achieved all of his goals.
Yeah, definitely. But it's even like in terms of the sequence itself, it's like you kind of go like, oh, come on, Peckinpah. At this point, you know what I mean? You almost feel like after The Godfather, after Bonnie and Clyde, after all this stuff, like you feel like you would want his testing to be of a comparable, you know what I mean?
Sonny Corleone going,
yeah, exactly, or like Christopher Walken in Heaven's Gate, a few years later, and it's not that, maybe because he's worried about getting an X too, but it's almost more like it's not even the impact is important anymore. It's almost resignation. Like, yeah, he's dead now. And it's this freeze frame, but it's not like it's a big, powerful explosion of the audience. It's just like, and the Jerry Fielding music is just resigned.
Yeah, it's very quiet and subdued. Yeah, but Jerry Fielding, it's funny. There's some of the music cues in this where I'm like, wait a second, did he just slip back into like the soundtrack to the Wild Bunch? Like Jerry Fielding, because Bob Dylan did the score for Pat and Garrett and Mill the Kid, I feel like it's like, and I know Fielding was still involved, but like he'd been kind of sidelined, and it was a big palate cleanser. But I love how with this movie, suddenly we get back to that kind of classic Peckinpah soundtrack or score that we associate with his movies. And it makes it feel all the more like a signature Peckinpah movie when you hear some of that classic Jerry Fielding music. But it is eerie how both Fielding and Peckinpah are kind of choosing to wrap this movie up on a very subdued note as opposed to a big climactic finish.
Yeah. They're both kind of like, like Fielding's music, it's like, oftentimes in movies, or at least in Peckinpah's films, it's like there's something about it. It doesn't resolve itself, or it doesn't have the melodic feeling of like a Morricone or something. And I feel that they're simpatico in that sense. Like they're both. They don't want to resolve themselves. They don't want to complete it. They want to leave it open. You know what I mean? It's melodic, it's beautiful, but it's open. It's not fully satisfying unless you actually grapple with it.
Yeah, it means you just got to watch it again and again and again. So yeah, I strongly recommend people with my naked eye, I have a very hard time testing the difference in quality between these two versions. You asked me like, which version of the Blu-ray do you have? I don't know what's the best version out there in terms of transfer, but I watched my DVD. I first watched the Blu-ray, then I watched the DVD, then I watched the Blu-ray. And I had a hard time telling the difference, but I'm sure somebody who's more of like a Blu-ray and kind of format purist will be able to explain exactly what the difference is. But what I do like about the Blu-ray, they went with one of the best international posters for the film. And I think there's so many Blu-rays these days that have these like inexplicably ugly covers. Like when I posted that I had just received a Blu-ray for Death Wish, you were the first to point out, like, that's not even the right gun that he's like that he's wielding on the cover. Like, where did that image come from? It came from the third movie. So like, it's like, who's making these decisions? And I feel like when in doubt, your default setting should be find the best goddamn movie poster from back in the day and just go with that. And that's exactly what they did. And it looks fucking gorgeous. Like if you're not going to hire David Lambert or Tony Stella to do a new work of art, go with one of the works of art that already exists. And there are tons of fantastic posters out there for this flick.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it lends itself to it, and I mean, the title alone, you know, is it the best title of all time? I don't know. It's up there.
It's strong. It's very strong. Yeah. I mean, what are the other? I mean, like there are good iconic titles like The Empire Strikes Back. Like if you just take that in isolation, it's a very descriptive title. It lets you know exactly what the movie's about. And I feel like a title that is cool, but also kind of explains the story is always a good title. Like when you hear the title RoboCop, you're like, all right, I have a pretty good idea of what RoboCop is going to be about. And so, yeah, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. It's pretty fucking good. I mean, it will always be in the conversation for best movie title ever conceived. And I think that's part of what lures people to it. But it's funny how it's still to this day, 50 years later, has such an intense cult following, because at the time of its release, critics were not into it and audiences weren't really into it as well. I see here that its initial box office was about 700,000 off an estimated budget of 1.5 million. So not a success. And if you go to Wikipedia, you can see a few snippets of the reviews at that time. And yeah, critics were just absolutely fucking merciless toward it at the time, apart from a few rare exceptions. But I'm just thrilled that here we are, half century later, and it seems like its reputation continues to grow. Like I remember when in the early 2000s, when I was first living in LA, had kind of like a quiet, notorious reputation amongst like diehard Peckinpah fanatics. But it seems like its reputation now is starting to spill out, where people who aren't even necessarily Peckinpah diehards are discovering the film and wrestling with it for whatever reason. I'm thrilled people are continuing to discover it, because I feel like as great as some of his more obvious movies are, I want people to wrestle with the entire career, the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is definitely for me in the good pile. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of maybe consider it like Peckinpah. There is a contingency of people consider Peckinpah's best. I could never go there. Just because like I said,
but it still fucking rules.
Oh no! I mean, it's up there, and he's laying himself bare and everything, and it is fascinating.
I'd say it's better than The Getaway. Definitely better than Major Dundee. Better than Noon Wine.
I would go
better than Junior Bonner, but it's not as strong as like the obvious like 4 or 5 like Elite.
I would rank it maybe on the same level of like a Straw Dogs. Maybe Straw Dogs is maybe a little bit better, maybe tiny more focused, maybe more. I don't know. To me, it kind of ranks on that level. But I mean, it's a great movie, and there's so much stuff that we haven't even talked about. The scene where Warren Oates comes out of the grave, you know, that whole sequence. I guess Warren Oates is on mushrooms
in his mouth. It's so gnarly.
yeah. I guess Warren Oates is on mushrooms that whole time.
No way. What's a crazy scene where he's dug up this body. He's about to do this horrible sacrilegious act of beheading a corpse. And out of nowhere, the shovel connects with the side of his head. Like, where the fuck did that come from? And that's a great behind the scenes still of Peckinpah kind of choreographer setting up where he's holding the shovel and Warren Oates is like, you know, getting in position. And yeah, it's you get that moment. It's almost like when Pat Garrett kicks the guy who wants to cut off Billy's trigger finger, where he's like prolonging the violence. And it's like a really confusing moment where like you don't quite understand the transition from getting hit to waking up half buried alive, and you have to kind of play catch up there for a second. But it's a horribly traumatic moment, because for a moment Benny thinks that his lady is still alive, but sadly she is not.
The most affecting violence in the movie it might be the violence that isn't gun violence. Like it might be the shovel to the head or the elbow to the face. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that
What about the loving violence between the two of them when she bites him on the stomach when he's passed out and she pulls his underwear and he's like, ow, God damn it. But like the intimacy between the two of them is so sincere and so believable, whether she's biting him or when he wakes up with crabs and he leans over to kind of kiss her, but also bites her on the shoulder. And then when he comes out of the shower, he twists up a towel, like whoosh, kind of whipping her on the ass, like trying to get her like up and running. But like that kind of friendly, playful violence between the two of them, it reminds me almost like brother-sister violence in a lot of ways. But that's the kind of like, you know, playful wrestling that couples will indulge in after they've gotten very used to each other's company.
Yeah, or like when he sees her again and he calls her like whatever he says, no down bitch or whatever.
Yeah, when he finds her in the club performing for those guys.
Yeah. And you were bringing up earlier, and I kind of cut it off because I had a different point, but she is great in the movie. I guess originally Peckinpah had given the role to Aurora Clavel, who plays Pat Garrett's wife in the second preview cut of Pat Garrett Billy the Kid. And then there's also Pike Bishop's lover in the flashbacks who gets killed and everything. And she was originally cast. And I'm not exactly sure why it dropped out, but she had no issues with Peckinpah recasting. She said yes.
I think they wanted somebody older, or at least I read somewhere that Peckinpah wanted a girl with a little bit more kind of life experience. And it makes sense that you have an actress who's like well into her 30s because this needs to be a character where you believe she's got a lot of history.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know their prospective ages, but I feel Aurora Clavel would be about the same age as Ella Vega, but I'm not sure. But I know that when she got on set, people were kind of looking at her like breasts and everything, and she immediately just tore her clothes off. She said, "Get a look at them. Get a good look at them, boys. You're going to be seeing them a lot." You know, there's a lot of stories about her just going naked in front of everybody and everything. I think eventually Peckinpah was like, "I'm tired of seeing you naked," or whatever. Stop it. But so there's a lot of weirdly. If you read the Susan Campos War and Oates bio, War and Oates of Wildlife, it's got a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, you know. But
gotcha. So yes, so you laid on me. The book, is it worth a purchase? Did I mean, as somebody who, you know, obviously is interested in War and Oates, is that one of the better books out there on his life and career?
Yeah, I haven't. I've only ever picked parts out of it, so I've never read the entire thing. But hey, I can send you a free copy. So
well, it's one of those things where I love War and Oates. I almost never read biographies of actors. I think John Wayne might be the only person. I've read the Gary Wills biography of him, but when it comes to reading biographies of filmmakers, it's always a director that I'm more interested. I mean, occasionally I'll read like that tell-all biography of like Don Simpson and all this crazy drug mania and that sort of thing. But more often than not, I'm interested in directors as opposed to actors. But you know, but a cool documentary about War and Oates, I would be totally game.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh, he's one of the best. I mean, yeah, he's War and Oates.
I first saw him in Stripes when I was a little kid. He was fucking awesome in it when he has that line like "Lighten up, Francis," and he's hilarious. And then over time, I went working my way backwards. And was it an episode of The Outer Limits where he got to play an alien? That was like his first big role where he has the big giant eyes.
Yeah. But he was also the guy who I believe made on Broadway the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He was the original McReady or whatever the guy's name. RJ. What is the guy's name in? No, that's the thing. What's the guy in Cuckoo's Nest? Anyway, the Jack Nicholson character in Cuckoo's Nest. And after this, he went and did Cockfighter for Monty Hellman,
which is good.
Yeah, and Charles Wilford.
R.P. McMurphy is the character.
McMurphy, not McReady. Yeah. I was doing the thing. But,
but Cockfighter, I love. I feel like that's one of the Monty Hellman movies that people really sleep on. But Harry Dean Stanton's good in that as well. But like when you really see, just like I like movies that go into blood sports and show you the minutia and the detail. And like, well, it's easy to dismiss a movie like Cockfighter and say, I don't want to watch a movie about cockfighting. That sounds disturbing. But it's like if you really want to understand what it takes to train the birds and have them fight and like live in that world and make a living off of it, Cockfighter is a fascinating character study.
Yeah, well. It's interesting too because obviously in Cockfighter, War and Oates is mute, You know, he does everything with his face, and this movie that he done right before it, most of the movie he's working without his eyes because he's got those big stupid Peckinpah glasses. So you're really reading everything on his mouth, which he does have one of the most expressive mouths.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
And teeth in the history of films, but still.
And speaking of which, I've got one more clip from that opening scene where you get to see that big, beautiful grin of his.
He's quite a ladies' man. His name is Alfredo Garcia. Maybe you could help us find him. He's about 30. Sometimes he calls himself Al Garcia. He speaks English, Spanish, and a little French.
Quite a stud, huh?
I mean, you could apply that to Warren Oates just as easily. Quite a stud. He's a handsome devil. And I love when you first see him and he's playing Guantanamera for tourists and he's like, sing it. And it's like, he's so animated. And like when those guys put a $5 bill in the tip jar, he's like, oh, we got a live one here. And he's like, you know, he's a hustler. He's always trying to get the party going. He's always trying to get the tips flowing. But like you see a side of Warren Oates that you so rarely see where like he could be the center of attention in a room with a bunch of loud, crazy drunks and entertaining everybody. And like, yeah, he's like a true lounge lizard in a lot of ways. And yeah, you immediately know what kind of character you're dealing with. And it's a fact, like you dive right in and then you can't take your eyes off him the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And that's also why it's like I said, like this movie not being like one of Peckinpah's most like stylistically adventurous films. It's like, whether or not you want that, you want a heightened version of this, like, you know, your imagination's versions of Sam Peckinpah's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. It's like whether or not he was slipping or what, it's like he still knew that just putting it on Warren Oates, you don't need montage. Just put a fucking camera on this guy because he is that guy. He
put
is
a dirty suit on him, covered in blood and quite like dirt from a grave. Put a big nasty gash on the side of his head where he got hit by the shovel, and just like the sight of him, like which you captured in your illustration, the sight of Warren Oates with that dirty suit and just like I don't know, just like the layers of human suffering that you can read in his eyes. But it's like one of the best images in like movie history of somebody who's lost it all and they've got nothing left. All they got is this fucking head and this idea of it being their ticket out. But it's just like a man whose life and soul is in ruins. And something about between Warren Oates, his acting and the wardrobe choices and the special effects, it's like, it's what makes this movie so irresistible when you keep revisiting it. It's just like, what is Peckinpah trying to say about what is being done to this person, what the head represents? And it's so mysterious. And I feel like you can, if you want to feel creative, like you can kind of take the ball and run with it a bunch of different ways, but it's incredibly symbolic. And I feel like more so than a lot of other Peckinpah's movies.
Yeah. And then also, and I know probably winding down, we're going pretty long here, but
the movie's an hour and 12 minutes long, and we've been going 101 minutes. So technically we have 11 minutes to go before we break my rule about never going longer than the running time.
But a lot of people make this joke about this movie, like they'll make a joke like, "Oh, he's this low down lounge singer guy," and then suddenly he does this and he can outshoot everybody.
Yeah,
but the movie,
yeah,
exactly. The movie makes a reference about how he's in the army, he shot a lot of pistols, and she goes, "You never saw action movies, you'd be surprised," you know?
Yeah, there's a great scene where he's shooting the gun in the air and he's shooting at these birds, and you don't quite know, is he missing on purpose or is he missing because he's just like he's hammered and he's driving drunk or whatever? But it's a great scene. But yeah, he alludes to the fact that he does have some experience with firearms, and also when he goes to buy that goddamn machete, like he's swinging it like he's done something like this before. So I never have any trouble believing that this is a man capable of violence.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because Peckinpah doesn't make a big deal out of it. I mean, he gives you an explanation and he lets your imagination go. He doesn't make a big deal out of it. And on a certain level, structurally, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is very similar to like Unforgiven. It's about a guy who you don't know what Benny has done in his past. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're introduced to him as a loser, but his competence in a gunfight and this reference to the army, and you'd be surprised, you could build so much out of that. And people, I guess, seem to miss it.
Are you preaching a prequel For Benny, that would be Hollywood culture in 2024.
Absolutely not doing that. But what I'm saying is that even on its own terms, Peckinpah could have done something where he gets you worked up and gets you, for the vengeance and everything, and he doesn't. He doesn't give you that kind of satisfaction, even though he does go and kill everybody. It's for nothing. He doesn't draw you and pull you in, and I think that's why he doesn't draw you in and pull you in, I guess, on those levels, like a Death Wish movie or anything. But to compare it to something like Unforgiven, which is a movie that's way more well respected and everything, but that movie does pull you in and draw you in. You go, oh, these guys have fucked with the wrong guy. And the thing is that Bring Me the Head Great Alfredo Garcia has that same kind of idea. They keep calling him a loser. He's a loser. He's a loser. But no, this guy can outshoot everyone. He could fuck you all up, but the movie never makes a point of that. And it would be in lesser hands, or somebody who was trying to be more like, just trying to, force feed the audience or for just simple gratification. He could have done that, and he doesn't. And anyway, I don't know. That's just a point I want to bring up. I've
never had any problem whatsoever believing that he can kick much ass. And even if it seems like initially this is a bartender with no prospects who sings in a lounge and blah, blah, blah. Like I know I've been inundating people with clips. I have one final clip when they're first making the original deal, and it seems like they're holding all the cards, but there is a quiet confidence there.
All they require from you is physical proof that Garcia is dead.
We can't have physical proof.
We're well aware of the problem, and we're prepared to settle for his head.
Like in that scene, they're holding all the cards, but I never have trouble believing that this is a guy who's able to follow through. Like when he jokes about how, I'd like to be alive at the end of this process, you get the sense that he's encountered and dealt with dangerous people before, and you don't quite know all the details, but he doesn't seem to be completely naive while dealing with these hired killers who are basically they're like the middlemen between Mapache and him. And so, I like how they give you just enough information to believe the fact that in a gunfight, he can totally pull his own weight.
I agree with that too. But even people that love this movie, I oftentimes see people kind of act like it's Peckinpah just kind of giving into just genre expectations of this guy who's a loser. Like they take that on like surface level, like this guy's a complete loser, but somehow he's just the best. He's just the best shot in Mexico somehow. And for me, it's like
his first big shootout, he slams his car into two guys, and it's just him versus two. The next big shootout, he doesn't even shoot his gun. It's the hired killers who are taking out the people who have taken the head from him. And then when he the next big shootout is when he's back in the office, but he kind of gets the drop on them because they're all hanging out like they're like take the money and run, you fucking loser, blah, blah, blah. Once again, they're underestimating him. So for me, it makes total sense that he's able to get the drop on them and start blowing guys away. So it never breaks the believability or the verisimilitude. Like the internal tension of the film is always sustained from my point of view.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I guess I'm just more calling attention. Calling attention. I've been drinking. Okay, I'm just calling attention to the people that I just feel that Peckinpah could have done a movie where it's like. It's the old cliche of the person. It happens in Westerns and all the time, and Unforgiven is built all around it. But it's the idea of like someone's in a bar or something, and they start talking shit on a dude, and they keep talking about shit, challenging him, and then his friend goes, "You don't know who that is? That's the blank kid. He'll kill you. He's the best gunman." And the other guy gets scared away. And Unforgiven is based on the whole thing. It's like he's a loser, but he's actually the greatest gunfighter of all time and everything. And you could see where this movie could have been that same thing. This retired gunfighter, this guy who could kill everybody, getting drawn back into it and everything. But Peckinpah isn't doing that. He's not interested in that. He's not interested, even though he goes in genre and everything. He doesn't go for the easy genre thrills. And while Unforgiven is this movie that that I love, but I will always, kind of pick at because people hold it as this big anti-violence thing. But Unforgiven is a movie that, just as much as anything else, any other Western, revels in the violence of, they don't know this guy is the guy who can fuck them all up, and they keep pushing it. And they have all these ideas about violence, but in the end, everyone comes out of it, yes, that was great, that was cool, he killed everyone. And in this movie, that happens, but it's not built up in that same way. It's not built up like, oh, these guys who've hired him, who think he's a loser, don't realize he's the killer. You know what I mean? And so much so that people who watch the film don't even realize it. And then they go, well, it's just a Peckinpah sort of trope or cliche that the guy can outshoot everyone. But it's like, no, it's because Peckinpah isn't interested that he could outshoot everyone. He's interested in the fact that this guy is a fucking loser. He's been perceived that way, And in the end, he actually, despite the fact that he is more capable in the language of death or whatever, he is in the end still a loser because he doesn't see what is actually truly valuable. Anyway, but I
think that
also,
was very, very eloquently put, and I don't know if we're going to do better than that final part.
Okay, that's just what I'm saying is that this is what makes this movie interesting, is that on the surface, from its title, from its concept on down, is that it feels like this would be Peckinpah at his most uncontrolled, most indulgent, just whatever pathology is in his mind that he can engage in. But it's not even close to being his most like bloody, violent film. It's not even close to being the film that gives you true like satisfaction or catharsis or any of that. And that's why I think it is so fascinating, because it just, you're always caught off guard. And then even when you look at things and you go, this is a Peckinpah trope or a Peckinpah staple, he's kind of running through it again. He's not. He's running through it again only because he's never fully conquered it. He's never fully grasped what he's trying to do. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm right there with you. I regard it as one of his essentials, like the Peckinpah essentials for me: Ride the High Country, The Wild Bunch, Straw Dogs, Ballad of Cable Hogue. The Getaway, I would say, is the least essential of the essentials, but I still include it in the essentials just because it's so well done. And obviously, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. I think all of his movies are worth watching. There's a collection of movies that there's a reason why we're still talking about and obsessing over Peckinpah all these decades later, is because a handful of his movies are unlike any other movies ever made, and I would include Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia in that mix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's to me, it's essential Peckinpah, and The Getaway is not a movie I really truly love that much, but I put that as essential Peckinpah just because I feel that
it's just so fucking entertaining.
Not even that, but I think on a stylistic level, he knew like that the material itself wasn't up to his level.
Have you ever read the novel? The only Jim Thompson novel I've ever read was The Killer Inside Me.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily right for Peckinpah, but even then, it's just But I just feel that his like level of editing and montage in The Getaway is his best. Yeah, the best. But this is definitely essential Peckinpah. I mean, yeah, you can't go around it. It really is.
Yeah. Like if you were to put off or postpone watching the Osterman Weekend, no one would blame you. But if you said, "Oh, I love Peckinpah, but I just don't want to watch that," like, well, then you just don't love Peckinpah enough. Because if you love Peckinpah enough, you're going to watch all the movies multiple times, and that's when. And then it's like the conversation begins with, "Oh, I've seen his entire filmography. Now let's talk about it." And so I feel like, yeah, there's no way to like partially complete the journey if you want to consider yourself a Peckinpah enthusiast. You got to enjoy the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the whole journey. Even if it's a music video starring Julian Lennon, you got to absorb all the Peckinpah out there that is to be absorbed. I think his very last thing he ever shot was that Julian Lennon music video, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of like aesthetics and as a craftsman, this is not it. But in terms of trying to put himself on screen or whatever, this is, I feel, his like last grasp, and he like or last gasp. What am I saying? But he's trying to put it all in there, you know,
He's leaving it all on the table.
Yeah, but not in a way that is loose or anything. It's honestly a very controlled film.
Imagine if this were his final film, though. Like, it would be so notorious. Like, oh my God, have you seen that? Like, yeah, just it would be a more poetic story. Like, so many filmmakers, sadly, direct more movies perhaps than they should. But once again, it's like if you had the ability to make movies, like I feel like their attitude is everybody can go fuck themselves. I'm gonna make as many movies as I like. Like George Cukor, did he make movies for too long? Probably, but he enjoyed making movies. So who are we to tell him that he's not allowed to continue making movies? And I feel like, but if Peckinpah's career, like imagine if there was no Deadly Companions and there was no, Osprey Weekend, but instead it just went from Ride the High Country through Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, it would be regarded as like the best 13 years of filmmaking imaginable. But then you don't get like the Westerner and all the other stuff that we've talked about in years past. So yeah, he's got just a multifaceted career that goes all the way back to, I guess, like the earliest thing I know of him being in was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but directed by Don Siegel, where he appears in it. But like, what is the actual like true beginning of Peckinpah's career in your eyes?
Ooh, probably. I mean, I think his earliest credited work is he rewrote adaptations. There were radio shows of Gunsmoke before the TV show, gotcha. And so he adapted the radio shows for the television show Gunsmoke, and I think that is kind of where he started, or at least started as rewriting dialogue or something gotcha. To that effect. But well,
as I start getting into my 75th anniversary videos, who knows? Maybe we'll have to do the 75th anniversary of Peckinpah's earliest professional work and see if you can see any trace of his fingerprints being left on the work.
Oh yeah, well, it's all over, and it's one of those things where, even the stuff that he worked on that was compromised, whether it's from the studio, whether it's from his own demons. Usually from the studio, though. But it is even the stuff that he worked on that was compromised. You can put it up to stuff he had more control of in contrast. And so it's all valuable to kind of just check his life as an artist. Like he's one of the best, he's up there. This was made when John Ford died, and I think they had like a salute to John Ford. And Peckinpah talked about him, and he talks about how he didn't like his later movies and stuff, but and how different they were as artists. But he still gave a salute to him. And I know Emilio Fernandez on the film said, John Ford was great. He was my compadre, and Peckinpah is just like him. He's like a son or a grandson, and gave a whole thing about it. I'll post it on Twitter and everything, but no, Peckinpah is one of the great artists, and this is one of the movies where he was able to bear his own soul. You one level you wish that he was able to do it with the at the level of something like The Wild Bunch with everything behind him, but that's something that probably would never happen. So you have to accept it for what it is, and I think it's a great film. One of the great crime films in the 70s. One of Peckinpah's great films, and one of the great Warren Oates films, and a very fascinating, interesting portrayal of Mexico, made with an almost entirely Mexican crew, Mexican cinematographer and everything. So it's a great film. It's a great movie. It's a fucked up weird movie too.
Yeah. Well, I know you would have preferred to be tackling Horizon Chapter 2, An American Saga, but I'm glad that you were willing to lower your standards to tackling this Peckinpah film with me on this day. And I'll just have to I'll have to rack my brain a bit to find another compelling pitch for you to lure you back to the channel in the months to come.
Yeah, well, hey, Peckinpah is no Costner.
Exactly. You heard it here first. Peckinpah is no Costner, according to Western enthusiast David Lambert. Where can people find you online? Where can people find a print that you've created? Again, now's the time to lay bare your soul and tell people where they can find everything that you've been working on.
David Lambert Art on Twitter. You can find me there. You can find my art there to a certain degree, but mostly I post about old, like Western movies, Old West history. But if you are a Peckinpah fan, you'll probably like my page. More than any other filmmaker, I probably post about Peckinpah the most. So yeah, check out David Lambert Art if you want the Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia poster I did. Send me a DM, and I'll get it to you within the next few weeks.
Fantastic. Well, we hope y'all have enjoyed this video. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, all the good stuff. And if you want to hear more David Lambert ranting and raving about Westerns, I brought him on the channel earlier this year to talk about the original Roadhouse. I brought him on to talk about Pat Garrett and Bill the Kid. We also tackled Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1. And I love the fact that Kevin Costner was trying to make these movies, but I did think it was amazing that the second movie got pulled from release when it was already on the calendar. I can't remember the last time a big expensive movie just got pulled from the schedule in such a high profile way, but it is going to play at the Venice Film Festival. So who knows, maybe it is the good one in the franchise. It'll help, increase its future prospects, but we'll be back to tackle that at some point down the road, I'm sure. But I can't thank y'all enough for listening. Hope y'all enjoyed it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.